After losing in the quarterfinals to OG Albina in the BBR season number 8, we are back with more BBR content, even though we were knocked out, because we have the Summer Scramble. If you're excited for the draft analysis for the Summer Scramble draft tournament, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Our goal is 1,000 subscribers this year. Every subscription helps a ton towards hitting that goal. In today's draft analysis, we're going to talk a little bit about the team. This is going to be a lot quicker of a video than I would usually do for a draft analysis, and that's mainly because my team is very, very simple in concept, and I just want to have a starting point for you guys to look at and kind of get a sense of why I drafted what I did, especially where I'm so outspoken against the Sneasler. Why would I draft this Pokemon? But we'll get into that in a second. The big difference here between the Summer Scramble tournament and BBR season number 8 is that BBR Summer Scramble has Terra back, and we are using high power Terra. And when I mean high power, I definitely mean it. We have got King Gambit, Ogerpon, Wellspring Terra, Great Tuscan Terra, Raging Bolt, Annihilate. All of the powerful Terra threats that you are used to in high tier Terra are here. Maybe a few too many for my liking. We could probably knock a few more off the list, but we're in for some powerful Pokemon in this tournament, especially something like Raging Bolt. We got multiple of those in our pool, which is not a great Pokemon again, a pretty good Pokemon against us. But we'll get into the team a little bit, and the concept and kind of the idea around I found drafting this team is you just want to be able to check as many of these top threats as possible. 8 Mon in Scarlet and Violet is very difficult to draft a cohesive team that works really well. If you look at my BBR team from season 8, very, very underpowered team, but without Terra, we were able to really create a team that had, basically ways to check almost everything in the metagame and make cohesive builds. In this type of format, you're really not going to be able to do that. So the goal that I had going in was, let's draft 3 very, very powerful threats in combination. These Pokemon together, unbelievable offensive pressure, and just draft as many ways to defend, to switch in as possible. Something like a Azumarill checks so many Pokemon in this metagame, you would be surprised. Scizor obviously is just a very generally powerful, defensive answer, and so is Palisand as a hazard setter. But enough talking about that. Let's get into the team and quickly go through everything that I picked up. So with my first overall pick, guess what? I had the last overall pick again, which, surprise, surprise, it's me in the BBR. I'm going to pick last. But in SV, in an 8 Mon SV, in this type of board, I mean, I got Latios King Gambit on the wheel. That's certainly not bad. I'm certainly happy with that by all means. So I think honestly getting the wheel is just such an advantageous position. It's such a, I find it makes it so much easier to draft your seat. You have so much more knowledge going into each pick. So in 8 Mon, I think if you can get the wheel, make sure you get the wheel. It's just so powerful. So we went with Latios King Gambit. Now Latios King Gambit, and this is my Terra captain as well. Free Terra Preview King Gambit is just obscenely broken in Draft League. This is a very, very common combination that you'll see in something like DPL, DCL, and those high-level Team Tour plays. And that's where a lot of my thought process in terms of like building out this core is like, where do I go? Let's look at what people are drafting in those tours. And this is kind of where I came to. And the reason that I came to this is I think Terra King Gambit is obviously one of the best Terra captains on the board. The only ones probably better are probably something like Terra Raging Bolt, but I've used Raging Bolt so often on this channel already, I wanted something different, and Terra King Gambit, you don't have the opportunity to use that Pokemon very often. And then something like Latios, I used it in my Oras Yard Crest video, but haven't really used it much, so I want an opportunity to use that in Generation 9. But why do these Pokemon even work in combination? So what's kind of the theory behind these Pokemon? Well, King Gambit does a really good job of covering the dark weakness of Latios. Some of the Pokemon that can really take advantage of Latios is something like Darkrai, for example. Now with the Terra, we have to use Terra to be able to switch into something like the Darkrai. Obviously, King Gambit mirrors are going to be a very prevalent thing. Urshifu does a good job if it's Scarf of checking that. You have to use your Terra on King Gambit, but Terra King Gambit does a good job defensively covering for a lot of what Latios does. And offensively, what's really, really nice about King Gambit is it pressures other Psychic types. So Psychic types, defensive Psychics, not as common in this generation. You see stuff like the Slowking, Galars of the world, and the Muse, the Slowkings, are good ways to check Latios to a certain degree, and King Gambit opens up against those defensive psychics, which can be very, very problematic. Also, fairy types as well can be very problematic for something like the Latios to actually contend with offensively, and King Gambit does a good job just pressuring those extensively, while also covering some of the ways that Latios can get offensively pressured in this team. So they just have a really, really good combination, and as I said, Terra King Gambit is one of the most powerful Pokemon in Generation 9 Draft League. The ability to just remove the Steel Dark typing, which is a very, very poor typing combination defensively. Offensively, it's really, really powerful. But removing that defensive typing for something like Fairy, Poison, Ground, etc., just very, very powerful as a combination. So these two in combination offensively do a lot. And I drafted the Pokemon that I banned in the JJDL. I think this Pokemon is ridiculous. And what this really enables here is it breaks Steel types. So you kind of want to break Steels for both the Latios and the King Gambit to really be effective. So Sneasler does a good job of that. And then it also just breaks Fairy types as well, allows King Gambit to have different roles in this matchup. I think as a win condition to go along with Latios and King Gambit that just do a good job of breaking down teams, Sneasler is just a perfect win con to be enabled by this team. The only thing that these three in combination don't deal super well with is defensive bulky waters. Latios really has to put a lot of work in with Luster Purge and Draco Meteor in that situation. But otherwise, these Pokemon just in combination are so powerful. And I think Sneasler is just one of those Pokemon that, even without Terra, I think is just one of the best Pokemon as the board. I understand why a lot of people don't go for it as an option, but on Burden, as a sweeper ability, I think a lot of people have kind of been put onto the Fling Big Nugget tech recently as a great way to break through ghost types, which, to be fair, this team does a really good job of breaking with King Gambit as well. Kind of the offensive synergy just working so well here. But I think as an endgame sweeper, I think this Pokemon is just like the perfect complement to Latios and King Gambit, and what you can just do to break down with these Pokemon. Just open Sneasler endgames for days. So as an offensive trio, I think this is a really, really good big three to have. And you'll see in a lot of the games that we have coming up just how well these work together. So offensively, that's kind of the idea, is that Latios and King Gambit do a really good job of opening up for the Sneasler endgames that we can have. And they just break through the team for Sneasler. The rest of the team is all about enabling this trio of Pokemon. So they're going to be kind of the basis for the offense in this team. Defensively, we have something like Azumarill coming here. And Azumarill, man, this Pokemon just checks so much of the metagame. It's unbelievable. It checks the fire types like Chi-Yu, Blaziken, Cinderace. It can check something like Iron Treads to a decent amount, not that well, but enough in that situation. It can check Iron Boulder. It can sometimes check Annihilate. Now, Annihilate is Terra in this metagame, so that is something to know. It can check Garchomp in a pinch if need be. It can check the Great Tusk in a pinch if need be. It can check Palafin in a pinch if need be. Like, this Pokemon does so much defensively that just checks so many of the top tier threats. As I said, the goal of this team is not to build a cohesive team that you can really just like build, kind of those builds that we would build in BBR that just had answers for everything. And you were able to dictate the game on your own terms. You just need quick checks, soft checks to basically everything. And Azumarill is one of the best soft checks in Generation 9 Draft League for sure. If you haven't drafted Azumarill yet, you've got to get this Pokemon. And Scizor is another one of those Pokemon that's just like a perfect soft check to so many different things as a Steel type. It checks so many fairies, so many waters, so many of the grass types that are relevant in this metagame. Like the Ogre Ponds are super relevant into this metagame, and Scizor does a good job of managing those, which is going to be super important. Obviously, we have a Azumarill that also checks the Ogre Ponds with Sap Sipper, which is just an amazing other side effect of having a Azumarill on this team. Is Sap Sipper is just super powerful against the Ogre Ponds. So I think Azumarill and Scizor in combination just soft check so much of the metagame that just allow you to kind of enable defensively the top three. Palisand is a little bit more of a hard check. It's not as much of a soft check as some of the other Pokemon on this list. This is a really good Pokemon for something like Garchomp, for example, Great Tusk. Not like the Urshifus, unfortunately. For Sneasler as well. forces Big Nugget on that Pokemon. You can check Ursaluna. This Pokemon is just a decent rocker to have, and a hard check for some of these Pokemon that'll matter, and then it can soft check as well. As I said, soft checks are going to be the most important thing in this team, but this is just a really, really good hazard setter. That's one thing we didn't have actually up to this point. As much as having as many soft checks as possible to most of the top of the board is super relevant, you still need these hazard setters, and we only really had King Gambit to set up hazards before. So Palossand does a good job of that as well, while being kind of that soft check. And then we have a Pokemon that I've really wanted to try and Drifblim, and this is another Unburdened Sweeper. So one of the things I really wanted on this team was Thwackey, because I wanted to have grassy terrain to set up to proc Unburden on Sneasler and Drifblim. That's the one thing I don't have on this team. It is an Unburdened Sweeper, or an Unburdened Enabler. But Drifblim, I think it's just with the Unburden, this kind of just protects against the last ditch scenarios. You can use Resist Berries to Unburden proc, outspeed, and kill stuff like the Great Tusk of the metagame. You can do that to Darkrai, for example. A lot of things you can leverage with Unburden and Drifblim here, and it can also just be a weakness policy sweeper in the right scenario as well. And then Braviary, I just had points left over, and Braviary is just a decent flying stab option that you can just have access to on a team. Nothing too special, but teams that don't have flying resist, that's one of the things to look for. Is if people don't have common resist, then you can abuse stuff like Braviary, and that's pretty good value for lower down the board. So that is the draft analysis. As I said, I waffled a lot about this. I didn't want to put I didn't have that cohesive of a thought going into this. I just wanted to have a little bit of perspective on the team that I drafted. Going into pools, we are playing against Bope. Bope will be at the battle next week. He is a teammate on Team Star for JJDL, so super excited to play that one. We have Quinn in the game after that, and then we play our good friend Kaz, which is, funnily enough, he's in our pool. He's someone I prep a lot with. I've known him for almost 11-12 years at this point. Super excited to play him. The last time I played him in a competitive tour was DPL, actually, in season 4. And I knocked him out of DPL playoffs. So hopefully we have another successful game like that and we get to beat him. It's always exciting to play him in these hyper competitive tours, because we spend so much time, for my games, building and prepping together. So that's the end of the draft analysis. If you enjoyed, as I said, make sure to like the video and subscribe. As I said, this is very much me just waffling about the team. As I said, this is not a cohesive team. This is basically 3 broken Pokemon and then a bunch of soft checks to enable them. So as I said, we'll be doing this every Saturday until the new draft league, which will start, as I said, at the end of October. You'll want to be subscribed for that one for sure. But we'll see you guys then. And as always, have a wonderful day.